Friends of freedom, right now in this country, a growing number of young people, your children, your grandchildren, your friends, maybe the 18-year-old sitting across your own dinner table, believe that socialism is not a warning or even a nightmare in history's past, but instead they believe in the fairy tale that it can produce for them a better future. In 2025, the Cato Institute YouGov survey found that some 62% of those who are aged 30 and younger have a favorable view of socialism. On the other end of the spectrum, Gallup's 2025 poll found that the trust in capitalism has fallen to its lowest point in 15 years, down to just 54%. That is not a rounding error. That is a generation that has never stood in a breadline, that's never buried a neighbor who starved because of a failed government's promise, has never watched society's talent get buried in the ground of what they call equality. And because they haven't lived it, a dangerous, ever-growing larger number of them are willing to try it. So today, we're not just going to tell you socialism is bad and that capitalism is good and leave it there. We're going to show you the receipts. Real nations split by history into two halves, one free and the other one not. So you can see with your own eyes the facts, the figures of what freedom builds and what socialism and centralized government controls destroys. Today, we're going to ask why nearly 2 out of every 3 young Americans now say they like socialism. And then we're going to put freedom and socialism side by side in the same nations, the same people, the same soil, and let the data render its own verdict. This is about the talents and fortunes of freedom that God has already placed in our hands, and whether the next generation will invest it and multiply it or bury it out of fear and ignorance.
Arise! 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 For freedom's cause, prepared and prospering for all. For freedom's right! Arise!
Welcome to Arise for Freedoms, where we learn about the things that threaten your freedoms, physical and spiritual, and transform our lives to be productive, prepared, and prosperous in a troubled world. We don't just survive. Together, we thrive.
Friends of Freedom, welcome. I'm Colonel Griffith, retired. I'm a retired senior military officer, a former judge, attorney, JROTC instructor, a minister of Jesus Christ, and a successful father and husband. And together, we'll unite to change the world. You're listening to the only show that helps prepare you to be free, prepared, productive, and prosperous. What we call the 4 pillars of Arise for Freedoms. In short, freedom, properly used, makes us more prosperous, more productive, and more prepared for this life and the life to come. Today, we're going to be diving into one of the sharpest contrasts in the modern world. What happens when nations choose freedom and when another chooses communism or socialism instead. We'll look at the split of nations, the same people, the same history, but just opposite systems. And we'll let the results speak. Then we'll talk about how you can move truth forward and save freedom and prosperity. So now let's get into it. First of all, we got to understand that we are living the danger that we can no longer ignore. Freedom is no more than a generation from being lost at any given time. Before we discuss the past, we have to have an honest conversation about our present situation. This isn't some academic debate. Support for socialism is rising faster and faster, exactly where it matters most, among the voters that will be leading tomorrow. A September 2025 Gallup poll found that some 66% of Democrats now hold a positive view of socialism, versus only 42% who view capitalism positively. A reversal of numbers or a thought process has been going on ever since 2016. Likewise, a New York Times Siena poll found that some 49% of those who are 18 to 29 years old and that are Democratic-leaning voters hold a favorable view of socialism. A December 2025 YouGov Economist poll then also found that out of all likely voters, 18 to 29 years old, that they're essentially split. 26% favor capitalism, 28% favor socialism, and 46% are unsure. While Americans from age 45 to 65 favor capitalism by nearly a number of 3-1. A generation raised without the memory of the Berlin Wall, without the memory of the Venezuelan bread lines on the nightly news, without a grandfather who fled the gulag or who understand the Cuban oppression and remember the people building boats to come to freedom. Instead, they are being handed a lie and a rebranded social policy or utopian promise that they call socialism that gives the wrong belief that everybody will live in some utopia and happiness. The word changes. The dismal ending of socialism and communism never have. Let me begin by telling you about a parable called the Parable of the Talents to teach a principle. Because it's a story about industry and opportunity and freedom and consequences that was taught by Jesus. It's a story about what happens to a nation, a soul, an individual, a people, when they just bury their talents or expect to receive something when they're not industrious themselves. Those who maybe expect all things to be equal or that life isn't fair. In this parable that was written some 2,000 years before Marx ever put pen to paper, Jesus told a story that emphasized the need and benefits of everyone being free and to have the opportunity to develop their talents, no matter how great or how small they start. In Matthew 25, a master entrusts his servants, 3 of them, one with 1 talent, another one with 2, and another one with 5 talents. These 3 servants are to use their talents wisely. What I want you to understand, in English anyway, it kind of has a dual meaning. Talent, like we all know about, but a talent was also a large measure of nearly 70 pounds of silver, a lot of money. Any talent is a big deal. So before leaving, the master gave these 3 the talents, and 2 of the servants, the one that had 2 and the one that had 5, took their talents which they were given, and they put it to work. They trade, they risk, they build, and each of them double. The 3rd servant does something different. He believes life is unfair, that the master always collects and does unfair things to his servants, despite being given 70 pounds of silver. He digs a hole in the ground and he buries his talent out of fear and does nothing to multiply it. He doesn't even get interest off of it. And when his master returns and asks for his money back, he hands back his master exactly what he started with, nothing more. When the master returns, the 2 who multiplied their talents, one from 2 to 4, and the other one from 5 to 10, received the exact same compliment and reward from the master. He said, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Because you have been faithful in a few things, I will make thee master over many." And thus it is in life. As we multiply our talents and the things in which we have stewardship over, not only do we bless ourselves, but we enlarge our ability to have freedoms, joy, and happiness, and we increase our ability to bless the lives of others. Well, the one who only had 1 talent and buried it in the earth, he who refused to risk, he who refused to build, he who refused to be productive with what he was given, he lost the talent that he had and was cast out for being an unprofitable and slothful servant. In essence, God does not reward the servant who buries his gifts, his skills, his time, or who does not want to develop that which he has been given and blessed with. Instead, he rewards those who take what they are given, use it wisely, and hopefully multiply it and bless the lives of others. And you can think about this with any true talent that you have. I speak Portuguese. After I hadn't spoken it for many years, my talent began to decrease. That happens with anything. Freedom is like a muscle. If we develop it and act upon it, we grow. That's the whole argument in one story. Freedom also, in essence, says, here's your talent, your labor, your land, your dreams, your liberty. Go multiply them. Become what you've always dreamed on becoming and help others do the same. Increase them, be blessed, and bless others by developing your talents. This is yours to keep, or at least to be a steward over while you're here on earth. Whereas socialism, on the other hand, says, hand over your talent. This belongs to the government, to the state, and we'll decide what you're allowed to keep. History has shown, and nations now show, that only one path builds a thriving nation. The others buries them. You must understand that the argument that those who are on the far left that are screaming that life is unfair, 89% of all millionaires are self-made in the United States. 89%. People are doing anything and everything that they can to get here because of the opportunities and freedoms that our country offers. So the proof is out there. Let's take the top 10 nations that are authoritarian socialists or socialists and communists. And let's compare that with free nations, ones that have parliaments, maybe with a token king that really has little to no authority, but parliaments, republics, democracies, and let's compare them. So the very top of the top 10 of all the nations in the world that has a socialist or communist form of government, the average citizen only makes $34,716. That's Belarus. As we go down the list, we can look at others. Number 3, Russia, $18,529. Let's go down. Number 5, China. Well, the one that everybody says, ooh, look at them. $14,863. That's almost half of our poverty rate. Cuba, 9,605, right? Iran, number 11, 3,936. Can you imagine even trying to survive with $3,936 a year? Now let's look at the top democracies, the top countries that have a capitalist, freedom-based society. Number 1, $226,809. Number 2, $158,733. As we go down the list, we notice something. Even the bottom countries, the Netherlands, $79,918. In other words, the lowest in the top 10 makes double what the very number 1 country makes in the socialist and communist governments. There's no comparison. But then the people say, oh, the distribution of wealth, it causes all kinds of problems. It's just unfair. Well, let me tell you another secret. In our country, the distribution of wealth, there is a large percentage that goes to the top 1%. It's approximately 32%. And 32%, that's what goes to the top 1%. But let me tell you some other numbers. It does not change under socialism. One of these countries here is 30-1. Sound familiar? In Russia, it's 59-1. When I say to 1, the bottom 50% own approximately 1% of their nation's assets. The top 1% owns 59. This is a country that promised that they will distribute everything equally and fairly. What I'm trying to point out is it never happens. China, here's another one, the exact same thing. They call themselves a socialist nation, even though it's a one-party communist nation. And the distribution of wealth, 31%. 31% of all the wealth in the nation is held by the top 1%. The bottom 50% only holds approximately 6% of their nation's wealth. So what I want you to understand is it does not matter what form of government that you have, there will be a class that has and a class that has not. Here's the difference. In the United States and the free countries, you have the opportunity to become whatever you want to become. You have the opportunity to break out. You have the opportunity and the freedoms to be what you want to be. In the United States, the average person makes, according to our GDP, or gross domestic product per capita, for each individual, $94,430. So then the next argument is, well, we got to take care of the poor. Oh, really? Okay. Well, our charity by the average American is 71 times larger than what the Chinese people can give. Our government gives 7 times more than what the government of China gives. That's right. That's what freedom does. It takes care of the poor because it provides the necessities that they need to be taken care of. And that's by private charities. The private charities almost 10 times what the government does. 10 times. Now, let's go down some others. Venezuela, since the promise of socialism began, remember, they were the jewel of South America once upon a time. And they had some bad government that abused their powers. And because of that, they lost it. But even then, they were much better off than what happened when socialism took over. Because history has shown that socialism almost always grows and grows and grows until it moves into communism. So when socialism took over, since the promise of socialism began in Venezuela, more than 7.7 million people left. Roughly 1 in 4. They were willing to cross deserts, jungles, and whatever was needed to leave that promised utopia. And many of them came here. I had one that was legally trying to enter into the United States at my dinner table. He told me about his friend who was shot, and he was severely beaten and threatened, and he decided to leave simply because he didn't believe the way that they believed. So many people packed what they could carry and walked out, left everything else behind, through jungles, across borders, away from the paradise that was supposed to feed them and instead buried them. Now here's something else. I want you to picture a poor American. Did you know that the poor Americans, those who are in poverty in the United States, that they're richer? Let me read this number to you. A household living in the United States or U.S. poverty has more purchasing power than roughly 85% of the people on Earth. That's our poor. Economists have found that the poorest fifth, the bottom fifth, once benefits are counted, consume more than the national average citizens of almost 85% of the people in the world. That is not accident of soil or luck. That is the fruit of a system built on freedom, private property, enterprise, and a God-given right to multiply and keep and be a good steward over what you earn and what you dream to become. That's what our forefathers saw. That's what our forefathers wanted, and they were willing to risk it all to make it happen against the most powerful military on earth. Let's just start comparing nations that are on this planet right now that came from the exact same background, the exact same system. China had a civil war right after World War II ended because of the great poverty and, once again, some bad governance that was going on. The nationalists versus the communists. The nationalists lost. They fled to Taiwan. That's why China to this very day claims that Taiwan is theirs. The same people, the same background, the same heritage, the same starting point after 1949. Let's listen to what the difference is between the two. The average citizen, and according to GDP per capita, according to the International Monetary Fund, the average Chinese citizen made approximately $13,862 in 2025. You know what it was in Taiwan? $34,238. Now here's the amazing thing. One took the road of private property, free enterprise, and the rule of law, while the other took collectivization, socialism at first, communism, and a one-party control. The free Taiwan is nearly 2.5 times richer per person than mainland China. And here's the crazy thing. The Taiwan government runs a budget surplus, while Beijing runs one of the largest deficits on the planet. I want you to remember this, too. Taiwan has no big resources. They're on an island. Despite being on an island versus the whole, one of the largest nations on the planet, and all the resources that they have and the people and the productivity that they should have, Taiwan outproduces China 2.5 to 1 if you count citizen against citizen, despite being on only an island. That's freedom. So let's take another one. Once again, after World War II, Russia took over the northern part of Korea. The Americans came in the south and was divided by the 38th parallel. They were both supposed to get out. Let Korea run Korea. The United States did get out. Left some bases behind to help protect them, but got out of their governance. Russia? No. They set up a puppet. But really what I want you to look at is the difference in their lifestyles. One free, the other one not. The average Korean or North Korean makes a pittance or a little teeny bit, $1,319. It's so bad there that they have to threaten to kill and arrest people who are trying to flee to South Korea. And one of the easiest ways to get out sometimes is actually to sneak through China, get a smuggler, and then come back to South Korea around the long ways. $1,319. Oh, now let's compare that to South Korea. South Korea, the average citizen makes $36,227 if you count their gross domestic product per capita of all the people. That's right. So here's the stark split between the two nations. One Korean people, one peninsula, divided by a 38th parallel in 1945. 80 years later, the free South is roughly 27 times richer per person, and the North still can't reliably feed its own citizens. While South Korea builds ships, phones, cars, and the world buys them. If you look at a satellite picture of Korea at night, it tells a story all by itself. As that satellite looks down on Korea at the night, the north half above the 38th parallel is dark and gloomy, while the south half below the 38th parallel shines like a Christmas tree. One is the light of freedom and all that it gives and offers. The other is the gloom of socialism and communism. Next, let's compare Russia to the United States. Well, I got something to tell you. Those two aren't even close. Despite them having a larger landmass and all that they have, it's not even close. In fact, we beat them so bad that you can take Texas, one single state all by itself, a state that is 1/24th the size of Russia. It has a fifth of Russia's population, and Texas produces $2.4 trillion every year, while Russia, $1.9 trillion. That's right, Texas all by itself beats Russia. The average Texan makes approximately 6 times more than the average Russian. Our poor, our poorest of poor, our bottom quarter, crush the average Russian citizen. That's freedom. And you ask Russia, what are they? They'll tell you they're socialist. So, one state with property rights and open markets outproduces a nation with 9 time zones. That's right, that's what Russia has, 9 time zones and a state-managed economy. I'll take freedom any day. So, why do people prosper under fair capitalism, not cronyism? And what I want you to understand is this is one of the stories that they don't understand. Those who scream for socialism do not understand how the system works. Number one, the critics of capitalism love to point to monopolies, price gouging, and corporate greed as proof of a system that fails. But the critics misunderstand what capitalism actually is. And oh, by the way, the socialist countries and the communist countries by far have more corruption than the capitalist societies do, because capitalism, the people are in control and they have the ability to punish those who abuse the system. So the free market in the United States, let's just use that one as an example, is built with guardrails. It's a free market system with guardrails. It's not just some winner-takes-all type system. In fact, here's some of the guardrails. It's called the Antitrust Acts. In 1890, the Sherman Antitrust Act outlaws any monopolies in price fixing. The law used it to break up Standard Oil way back in 1911. It's not even taught nowadays in school. The Clayton Act in 1914 and the Federal Commission Act of 1914 banned mergers that choked out competition and made unfair competition. So, for example, if the giant Walmart turns around and lowers their prices only in one area where the local grocery store is to put them out of business, they can go after them with these antitrust and the Clayton Act. Now, am I saying that business doesn't do what they can to win and to get the bigger share? No, that's what freedom's all about. But there's laws and guardrails to stop it. For example, the Robertson-Packman Act. It protects small businesses from being crushed by predatory pricing from giant corporations, similar to what I was just talking about. Then on top of that, every state has its own antitrust statutes that often mirror the federal protections and provide even more. Texas has them. Every state has them. If you think there's something that's unjust, I don't have any problem with that. Go and vote. Tell your congressman on how to use these laws to make it so there has to be even more competition, or the big guys can't get quite that big. We can disagree on what those sizes are and what those numbers are, But what I'm trying to tell you is freedom and capitalism has already put that system in place. Now the only question is are you as a voter smart enough to know what it does? So this is a piece of the socialists, and the socialists always that argue for it leave out. I love it when they sit there and they ask questions, and I've even seen them offer tickets. Oh, if this country is so bad, here's a one-way ticket out. I have never seen anybody take that offer. You want to know what country is having problems and which one is blessed? You didn't see thousands and thousands of Americans leaving to go to Mexico and South America in various countries. No, they were coming this way. And why? Because freedom reigns. Freedom blesses. Freedom gives opportunities. And we're going to blow up for a system that has never worked? You cannot show me one example out there in history that works. In fact, even the prosperous countries who have become more socialist have lost a lot of their market share and their productivity. I can name a few: Germany, England, Italy, France. Sound familiar? They aren't on that top 10 list anymore. They're still great, prosperous nations, and I love them. However, they are losing out because they are moving ever and ever more to the government in which they expect to take care of them for nothing and for all to be equal. I pray that America doesn't do the same. Now, here's the other argument that they make. They seem to think that the economy is static. In other words, there's only so many dollars and only so many people can have them. But that's not the way it works. The economy grows when capitalism thrives. If I turn around and I take dirt and I make bricks, that dirt is worth more. If I take land and I subdivide it and I build houses, suddenly a big cheap chunk of land becomes worth a ton of money. And as I build those houses, it produces welders, air conditioning people who make wires, wood, nails, you name it, it goes up. Then stores come in, and suddenly prosperity grows because of freedom. The pie grows. The economic pie grows. More people get more stuff. You don't have to work at any place if you don't want to. You're free to choose. Are you free in a lot of these other countries to choose what you want to do? They seem to think that for some reason, this view of the socialist world and the communist world will let them have their freedoms and yet divide everything up equally and fairly. That's not a reality. That's not what happens. Once the government gets control of the resources, the world loses. Socialism destroys wealth. Let me give you an example. You got Farmer A, Farmer B, and Farmer C. Farmer A produces a ton, very industrious. Farmer B works his butt off and he's average. Farmer C does little to nothing. Under this socialist system, they take from him who produced a lot and give it to him who produced very little. Now it's all equal. Oh, it's all fair. But here's the result of that. Farmer A says, why do I work my butt off? It does not matter what I produce or what I do. It's a dream killer. He might as well be average because he'll get the same either way. The average guy turns around and says, I busted my butt. Does he stay average? No. He says, I could do a lot less and still get the same thing. The only person that benefits is the person who does little or nothing. You wouldn't say this was fair with grades if the A student should give some of their grade to the D student. Why do we think that it's any difference with our monetary well-being? Now, I do believe that a system needs to take care of its poor and its needy. But that happens under capitalism. That happens under freedom. I work right now with dozens upon dozens of social organizations that help feed the poor. And only freedom allows that to happen. So what happens when a nation buries its talents? Let's talk about the death and suffering that actually come. Wealth ruined or destroyed and buried, and talents and dreams buried. But every time a nation has centralized its economy under socialism and communism in the name of equality, there's been a huge human cost. Studies have shown that the widely cited estimates for attributed to the 20th century communist regimes through engineered famine, mass execution, forced labor camps, and political terror. range from approximately 85 to 100 million people. Think about it. A Harvard-affiliated historian's more recent review put it upward in 80 million. Put this in perspective. Wrap your mind around this. That is more than both World War I and World War II. If you take everybody who died, there was more deaths that were caused by socialism and communism. That should scare you. And this figure just isn't one country. It's a pattern of repeated steps everywhere that it's been tried. The Soviet Union, the Holodomor, famine in Ukraine alone killed an estimated 3.9 million people. Is there any wonder why Ukraine wants to be free from Russia and is sacrificing everything that they can to keep their freedom? Stalin, the leader Stalin, he had purges, he had the Gulag system, mass deportations, work camps for those who disagreed with him. Careful estimates and somewhere between 15 and 25 million people were slaughtered or starved to death from this great movement that failed miserably. Many of them starved to death. Look it up. Maoist China. This is one of the most famous and saddest of all. They called it the Great Leap Forward. There was huge famine in the land, making it the deadliest famine in history. They estimate that 30 to 45 million died from the famine alone. And with the executions and other things that went on with those who didn't agree with the need to have a socialist and communist government, between 40 and 70 million more or total died. Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge, 4-year attempt to build this utopia that he told the people would happen. Some 2 million people, roughly a quarter of the country's population, passed away through either execution, forced labor, or starvation. North Korea, we gave you those examples already, but in 1990, the famine was known as the Arduous March, and scholars estimate that roughly 1 to 4 million deaths tied to the regime and its wars. Venezuela, once the Latin jewel, the wealthiest economy, they have more natural oil underneath their soil than Saudi Arabia. And at one time, they were prospering, and yes, there was corruption. It's too bad that they didn't do what was needed to vote it out and to put it into jail. Instead, they decided, let's go to socialism, and it was just downhill from there. The average Venezuelan, there was so little of food that the average Venezuelan lost 19 pounds. They called it the Venezuelan diet. There was medicine shortages. It was free. It just didn't exist. And it was the largest peacetime displacement crisis in the world. More than 7.7 million people, roughly 1 in 4 of every Venezuelan fled the country since 2014. That's what you want? In Venezuela, the economy imploded. By 2018, they had 196% inflation per month. In a year, it came out to be about 43 million% inflation. Can you imagine buying a loaf of bread and saying, a year later, it costs 43 million times that? That's what these things bring. Now, different continents, different decades, different languages, same idea, same ending, every time. The talent gets buried and the nations starve. Where would the world be today without the freedom that has come from the United States? Tell me any wealth that has ever been brought by a socialist nation. You can't. It doesn't exist. Socialism always leads to tyranny, government control, a lack of opportunity, a crushing of dreams, a burying of opportunities. Where are people fleeing from and where are people fleeing to? That alone ought to tell you something. You need ask nothing more. Like, subscribe, and receive our free newsletter, and join our community at ariseforfreedoms.com as we promote freedom, preparedness, and prosperity across the world. Now let's get back to the show. Let's use the communists and the socialist words against them. These are the architects of it all. You don't need to take a conservative commentator's word for the fact that socialism is designed to be a stepping stone to full communism. Oh, no, it isn't. I wouldn't do that. Well, let's look at the facts. The men who built these systems, what they themselves said. Vladimir Lenin, the one that started the Bolshevik Revolution that led to Russia. He described socialism as the first step on the road to communism, a line repeated across speeches and writings as Soviet doctrine. Joseph Stalin had a slogan that we have achieved socialism. Now we must achieve communism, treating socialism explicitly as a transitional stage and not the endpoint. Karl Marx himself described in his writings socialism as the transitional political period standing between capitalists and full communism. And let's also hear from the men who studied this, and they're some of the most famous men on the planet. One is Milton Friedman. If you want to go and see some stuff on free markets and free economies, go out and listen to what he had to say while he was on this earth. He said, a society that puts equality before freedom will get neither. Winston Churchill, who stood up against fascism and communism, said, the inherent vice of socialism is the equal sharing of misery. I like President Ronald Reagan's statement on it the best. He often spoke out against socialism and communism. And he said, socialism only works in two places: heaven, where they don't need it, and hell, where they already have it. Think of any government program. They almost never die. They only grow. And as people get more and more powerful, the abuses get greater and greater, and freedoms keep shrinking from the country, from the nation. Socialism never once delivered on a promise anywhere that has actually been tried on Earth. So let's apply what we've learned here today to freedom, productivity, preparedness, and prosperity, the four pillars. This week's focus is simple: a failed theory. The data is already in. The split nation comparisons that we just walked through aren't ancient history. They're today. They're happening in real time right now on the same planet on which you live. And then the theory that, but ours will be different. Why? How? What will you do to make sure that these abuses don't happen? A rising share of young voters have never been taught this history, and they're being asked to choose an economic system on vibes and slogans and fairy tales instead of receipts and truth. They're grabbing emotions. That is a freedom issue, a productivity issue, a prosperity issue, all at once. Because the system a nation chooses determine whether the next generation's talents multiply or get buried. And almost every time as it slipped from socialism to communism, there's been civil war. The country suffers and there is great death and starvation, even if that's not what they really want. So how do you apply today? You don't need a PhD in economics to determine things. You can listen to the 10 versus 10 that I showed you, that the top 10 countries in one system versus the top 10 in another. They're not even close. Remember, the bottom of the top 10 was 2.5 times greater than the top of the communist and socialist nations. But you can only think of 3 examples from the exact same background. Taiwan versus China, North Korea versus South Korea. And yes, you can even throw Texas against all of Russia. You have to have the willingness to have real conversations with someone younger than you this week, and maybe even your age or older. But we must stop this movement for socialism and help people understand what it brings and what freedom offers. We came here on this earth to be free, to choose, to grow, and to choose who to follow. Government controls have never brought prosperity to its people, only death, starvation, and poverty. So here's your 3 action steps for the week. Number 1, more than ever, go and share this episode as much as you possibly can with as many as will possibly listen, or just talk with somebody about the split nation comparisons. With one young person at least, but I ask you to do multiple. A child, a grandchild, a student, a coworker. Make sure those you love and care about understand the truth, and do it in a civil way. Do it with truth. Do it with understanding. Listen to each other. The truth shall make you free. Share the parable of the talents with a person and ask them, what do you think this means to you? Your labor, your land, your liberty. Can you be a good and faithful steward in bondage or when controlled? Number 3, please go support and vote for policies and protect fair competition and the rule of law. Now, we can disagree on what fair competition is, but the laws are in place. And you can do more to expand those laws. to ensure that freedom and prosperity continue. The antitrust guardrails that make America capitalism fair rather than crony. Rather than policies that hand more control to the state, that creates another bureaucrat that produces nothing but takes everything. So your freedom focus of the week, buried talents, whether it's from your inaction or the government's overreach, don't just cost individuals, they cost entire nations everything. Their food, their freedom, and in worst case, tens and tens of millions of lives. Multiplied talents enable democracy, freedom, and capitalism to build South Korea, Taiwan, and yes, Texas, but most importantly, the United States of America. And all the other free countries that I am so grateful for that exist across this planet. The prosperous nations, the choice was never between equality and greed. It's always been between burying what you've been given or not seeing the value and the opportunities and the blessings of what you already have and what you've been given and then putting them to work to the best of your ability. Today we learned that freedom and free enterprise, protected by fair and honest law, have outproduced socialism and communism in every honest comparison, and the results aren't even close. Throughout history, Taiwan versus China, South Korea versus North Korea, and the United States versus Russia. While centralized control has cost the world some 85 to 100 million lives from starvation and loss of opportunity and crushing dreams. More importantly, because we are doers of the word, your next step has to be to have an honest conversation with others. Someone who believes in this deception that socialism is a utopia, and then to put your own God-given talents to work instead of burying them in fear. Go out and prosper. Go out and invest. Live within your means and reap the benefits that this incredible country has to give. Until next time, don't just survive, learn to thrive in a troubled world. Now go and make the world a better place. Be productive, be prepared, and prosper in freedom's light. Now arise for freedoms. Join us and make this world a better place. Good day.
Arise, arise, arise for freedom's call. For freedom's light. Arise.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. It drew on some 23 cited sources, Friends of Freedom. That includes the national polling from Gallup, Cato, YouGov, New York Times, Siena College, The Economist, data from the World Bank. If you want a copy, please join our free Patreon community. Now subscribe, join our newsletter, and help us build a movement of a rise for freedoms. Good day.